no one ever really pays attention to like small business like that. That too is in itself entrepreneurship, and that legacy is so important.
Hugely.
And those are things that things have been foundations that have been built upon in America. Immigrants coming here, building a great life for themselves and their families, and that's something that's like for my parents to reach out and be like, hey, like we want you to like start the process of doing this. It's like it's truly like an honor,
Sure.
what I mean? And like that is more rewarding to me than trying to suffer my life away to make my first million.
So welcome to Not Quite the Bourbon Friday show. And since the show is on hiatus for the next few weeks, we wanted to do something a little special, especially since my guest tonight, Andrew Trinh,
Hey guys.
it's his last day at Kobo. So what better way than to spend your last few minutes at Kobo
By drinking a lot of bourbon.
by drinking a lot of bourbon. So as you may have seen, we're talking about pre-Prohibition brands and really how brands survive Prohibition, that of course aren't new, is through medicinal bourbon.
Mm-hmm.
And there were actually 10 medicinal licenses issued, but only 6 were used. And so tonight we actually have 6 brands that started before Prohibition, representing those 6 different companies that had different licenses. And we are starting out with Kentucky Tavern, let's call it a budget brand.
I like that term.
And this was from Glenmore Distillery, which is now owned by Diageo. It says bottled by Glenmore. Glenmore no longer exists. So we're gonna try this guy out, see what it's like, and go from there.
Sounds good to me. Thank you, sir.
Well, semi-light pours. This is, of course, an 80 proof, like most budget.
Cheers.
Cheers.
The thing I found funny about budget brands, which I like that term, by the way, is that a lot of people think like budget whiskeys are horrible because they're sharp and whatnot, but I find a lot of them to actually be quite easy to drink because they usually are lower proof, and widely, not single barrel by any means, like very, what's the term I'm looking for? Blended, most likely.
Blended, yeah. It's to be acceptable to most people's palates,
exactly.
right?
So it's not bad.
It's not bad.
I've not heard of anything about Kentucky Tavern before, but
It's not bad. I prefer, we had Old Charter on a few weeks ago. I prefer this to that.
Mm-hmm.
That, to me, didn't taste like anything.
this still has a good amount of body to it. The nose is not funky by any means, but it reminds me a lot of I don't know, when I first smelled it, it reminded me of a little bit of like a Scotch, which has kind of single note, light, kind of easy.
Yeah, my nose is all, sense of smell is all screwed up, but, which is also why Andrew is here. He actually has a much better palate than I do.
Supposedly.
I think it's true.
Yeah, it's quite nice.
Yeah, that's not bad at all.
No, like especially for the price too. It's easy on the wallet, easy going down.
Call that like a campfire bourbon right there.
Yeah, seriously.
Sit out there and chill. It's not fancy. Yeah, that's not bad at all. I don't know who this is. I mean, Diageo, so that would be who now?
I'm not sure.
Buffalo Trace, maybe, but I don't think this is made by Buffalo Trace. I don't think this is one of theirs.
Is it still made in Owensboro? Is that what it said?
Yep. Oh, no, Louisville.
Louisville.
So that's
Okay, he founded the Glenmore Distillery in Owensboro, but now it's in Louisville. Interesting.
All right.
I think that's a good way to start off.
Yeah. And trying something new, which I had never tried this, and like knowingly tried this. Mm-hmm. Certainly could have had it. I just like a
It's just
whiskey or something
it's something I find nowadays too is that like I tend to stick to the stuff I know in bourbon, which is I used to be much more explorative with it, but it's nice to try new things.
Sure.
Especially if like something like this you wouldn't think to pick up really, but I'd recommend this to somebody if they're just looking for something cheap to drink, and campfire bourbon. Just
Yeah,
goes down
campfire.
easy.
You want to mix it with something.
Someone doesn't know a whole lot about the notes and the processes of a bourbon, and that's a great.
Yeah, I think so.
Pay
And
for it.
like, I think it was like $10 at Total
Easy.
Wine.
Easy. Yeah.
Easy choice. All right, so now we're going to move on to the next one, and we can take however long this takes to. All right, so next up in line is Old Grandad Bonded. Bottled and bond, of course. So 4 years, 100 proof, same
good.
season. This is actually was a product of American Medicinal Spirits Company, which then became National Distillers, which was then bought by Beam, which is now part of Beam Suntory. This is made by Beam Suntory. A lot of the same notes as Jim Beam will have. I am a huge fan of Old Grandad 114.
It's one of the best.
And I haven't actually tried the Bonded, so.
I feel like I've had the Bonded before. I've been lucky to be a part of a few different whiskey societies where I've been friends with a lot of people who've been collecting for a very long time, people whose families own liquor stores and whatnot.
Sure.
And I think I might have had a Bonded before, but I was lucky to try a 1984 Old Grandad before. Seriously, some of the best stuff. Old Grandad always produces just really good bourbon.
Yeah.
That 114 is super dangerous though. Huge vanilla bomb. The proof is 114 and goes down like water.
I love it so much. And Old Grandad, if you didn't know who that refers to.
It's Eric.
No. Sometimes, yes. Basil Hayden.
Basil Hayden.
Yep, that is.
I did not know that.
Old Grandad is Basil Hayden Sr.
It's interesting because Basil Hayden products and Old Grandad products seem so different. You know what I mean? With their dark ryes and their finishes and everything. Old Grandad's just classic, it seems.
I know a lot of people like Basil Hayden bourbon. I am of that small batch Jim Beam stuff, not the biggest fan.
Not the biggest fan of it either, personally, but I do love Old Grandad. I'm excited to try this.
Definitely more off the nose.
Oh yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
You can tell it's a good product too, especially with the whole bottled and bond process of it all. But compared to the Kentucky Tavern, it's a little sharper, of course, higher in proof.
Sharper in that way, but not spiky. I felt like the Kentucky Tavern was a little spiky, especially that was our first drink of the evening. So
Exactly. But this, it has a little more oomph to it, which is really nice. And it's just like what I think of when I think of like a quintessential bourbon. You know what I mean?
mouthfeel is like, I think feels a lot better than most at this price. I think this was under 20.
You still get those notes of like vanilla.
Yeah, that's what I was.
That's so characteristic of Old Grandad. You get it more in the 114. I wonder if I don't want there's a correlation between like the higher proof and how much of that vanilla bomb you get, or what it has to do, extraction rates or whatever, but that's a solid bourbon. Do you know if they've changed their label recently, or has it always been this label? Because this looks really familiar to the old like stuff, like the bottle I've seen from like 1980s before.
I don't know.
But I love that classic look too.
Yeah. But anyway, so I guess we should say, or talk about, as I said, it's your last day at Kovo. Mm-hmm. What are you going to be doing now?
Yeah, so my family owns a wonderful restaurant down in the South Grand neighborhood. It's been there for 31 years as of February, so it's called Pho Grand, a Vietnamese restaurant. I will be there full time in hopes of learning the processes and all the back end works to hopefully gain ownership one day of that.
Sure.
Generational, passing it down, which is kind of cool. I've been working there for quite some time, part-time, managing front of house and stuff, but to now be there full-time and really get into the nitty-gritty of how do you run this business and how do you make it successful? What my parents have been doing for 31 years, I couldn't imagine, starting it from scratch and going through recessions and always having such a loyal base of customers. And it's more than just, making food and serving it, of course.
Yeah.
So Yeah, I'll be doing that. Today's my last day here. I'm super grateful for everything I learned at Kobo. There's a lot of things I've learned here in the co-working space, which is really cool that I can't wait to apply. Because as a community manager here, there's a lot that can translate really well into a restaurant business. Being a community manager at a co-working space is basically being like front of house at a restaurant, you know?
Sure.
Instead of new customers every day, you have the same people all the time, and your goal is to make everybody happy, to make sure that they're having a good time, a good experience, and trying to mitigate any problems at all. So, and the processes and like the wonderful people I've worked with here have definitely taught me a lot that I can't wait to implement there too, so.
Sure, and I think, having been to Fogren a number of times, you'd have to get used to a like somewhat frenetic pace there. And then here, somewhat slower, so a lot of, when problems come up, it's probably a little bit easier to deal with.
Exactly. Over there, it's busy, which is a really, really great problem to have, of course, especially in a restaurant. But that's like the kind of nice thing, you know? It's time just flies by so fast when you're working those shifts because there's so many things happening. You never sit around, you never get bored, you know, there's always something to do. And just like the immediate gratification too of like seeing like the smile on a customer's face when they're eating good food or had a good time, or like taking the time to like stop and shake your hand before they leave, you know, telling them how much of a great experience they have. It's like super rewarding. It's the same kind of reward I kind of get here from the co-working space too, of like, you know, people being like saying like, I love this place, the space that you guys have built is wonderful. It's like all that kind of same kind of stuff too, so that's nice.
No, and I think it's sort of underrated to have that sort of family business, keep continuing that on, and certainly in Bourbon you have a thing that I think about a lot is legacy and legacy brands and that kind of thing, and it's what we're talking about tonight. And what I'm trying to develop is whether it's Bourbon Friday or Tenacity or that kind of thing. You know, in the startup world, a lot of times that gets sort of maybe not crapped on, but certainly it isn't as the priority. Isn't the hottest thing to try and do. But I think it is super important. I actually think it's what is great about this country and what, you know, has built this country and continues to build it.
For sure, exactly. It's like one of the things I talked to a lot of people when I was like studying entrepreneurship in college, is that it seems like everyone's always focusing, and I totally understand, like you're focusing on the next big thing and like what's going to be the most scalable business and how am I going to make my first million and things like that. And I went into college being like, I want to learn all these skills, but growing up in a restaurant where my, you know, like in hopes of like one day taking it over, no one ever really pays attention to like small business, like that too is in itself entrepreneurship, and that legacy is so important. Hugely. And those are things that, you know, things have been, you know, foundations that have been built upon in America. You know, immigrants coming here, building a great life for themselves and their families, and that's something that's like for my parents to reach out and be like, hey, like we want you to like start the process of doing this. It's like it's truly like an honor, you know. What I mean? And like that is more rewarding to me than trying to suffer my life away to make my first million.
Yes. Or try and win the lottery because you came up with a good idea.
Exactly.
And hopefully somebody invests money in it and whatever. But
exactly.
You know, I think, and what I hope to a certain extent that this show really becomes is really we're looking at things like what entrepreneurship really looks like in the United States or wherever around the world, however that goes, but the entire scope of entrepreneurship and not just startups.
Exactly. Cheers to that.
Next time on Bourbon Friday. And to be clear, I'm not saying you should not try
Pappy.
the Pappies. You should wait when you see them. I don't necessarily know that you should go out and buy them or try and seek that out, because you're definitely going to be secondary, or unless you like literally luck out into finding the thing.
Exactly.
Which is why, I mean, look, all these trace products up and down the line because of Pappy are rare. If you want to hear more bourbon stories, check out these videos. And if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button. It would mean the world to us. You can also find us on social. We are at Bourbon Fridays on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and TikTok. See you next time.